Palmer's Alive Today presents
10 even much more defunct dead retail stores. The original store, P. Palmer & Company, was founded in 1852 by Chicago entrepreneur Potter Palmer. In 1865, Palmer invited Marshall Field and Levi Ziegler Leiter to form the retailing partnership of Field, Palmer, and Leiter. Field took control of the partnership in 1881 and introduced many merchandising concepts that were revolutionary at the time. Placing strong emphasis on total customer service, Field made his store a complete shopping world, providing virtually every product and service routinely needed, as well as many that were not so routine. He also originated the concept of an in-store restaurant for shoppers. The firm Marshall Field & Company Incorporated in 1901, continued to expand after Field's death in 1906. Over the years the company added more Marshall Field stores and purchased department store chains in other parts of the United States. It also built the Chicago Merchandise Mart in 1930 and entered the textile manufacturing business. In 1982 Marshall Field & Company was acquired by Battis Incorporated, an American subsidiary of London-based tobacco conglomerate BAT Industries plc. The Dayton Hudson Corporation purchased Marshall Field & Company from Battis in 1990. In 2004 Target sold the Marshall Field's department store chain to the May Department Stores Company, another American retailing corporation, and in 2005 the May Company was acquired by Federated Department Stores Incorporated, which operated Macy's. After the Federated purchase, Marshall Field stores joined LS Ayres and existing Macy's stores in the new Macy's North Division. During 2006, all Marshall Field stores, most Folene's and all the stores of 9 other May-owned chains were renamed Macy's. The conversion officially occurred on September 9, 2006. Many Chicagoans resented the New York City brand replacing their local brand. Hundreds of protesters gathered under Marshall Field's famous clock that day, and returned on the one-year anniversary, September 9, 2007. Dozens attended Field's fans' rallies each anniversary from 2008 to 2012. Many Chicagoans felt betrayed by Macy's takeover of Marshall Field's when the company began to change its aesthetics and customer service standards, and demoted many Chicago-based brands. In December 2006, Macy's reported 30% slower sales in former Marshall Field stores. The focus shifted to promoting the State Street location in 2007. In 1895, J. A. Williams formed J. A. Williams & Company, built and opened his J. A. Williams & Company dry goods store on August 29, 1895 in the new Halladen Purtle building designed by Frederick Dorn, who would later design the Marsh Strong building in the Broadway, Hollywood. Williams had a 30-foot storefront along Broadway. In February 1896, Williams went bankrupt and was liquidated. Arthur Letts bought the company. The Broadway started operating under Letts. The previous owners had a good location in a building at the southwest corner of Broadway and 4th Streets, but had all of its assets seized by creditors for failure to pay its bills after just 4 months of operations. In contrast, Letts was able to pay off all of his creditors in a short period of time after acquiring the assets. In a short period of time, the business was doing so well that it had to expand into adjacent storefronts. Between 1900 and 1910, the population of Los Angeles more than tripled. Bullock's, in 1907, and Hamburgers, in 1908, had both opened stores occupying entire city blocks. It was clear to Letts that the Broadway needed to expand to a newer building which was built from 1913 to 1915 in Los Angeles. In 1931, the Broadway bought the B.H. Dias Hollywood store which became the Broadway Hollywood. In 1940, the Broadway built a landmark 3-story store in Pasadena, at the corner of Colorado and Los Robles on the site of the old famous Maryland Hotel. It would be abandoned in 1980 for a newly built store across the street in the Plaza Pasadena Mall. In 1950, the company merged with Hale Brothers to form Broadway Hale Stores. In the same year it purchased the Westchester branch of Millerans and converted it to a Broadway. The store, designed by legendary retail architect Victor Gruen, was considered a model of ultramodern architecture at the time. The Broadway bought out competitors in Los Angeles and expanded into new markets through acquisitions, Marston's in San Diego and Corix in Phoenix. In later years, the Broadway opened stores in Las Vegas, Nevada, New Mexico, and Colorado. In 1979, it was split into two divisions, the Broadway Southern California, based in Los Angeles, and Broadway Southwest, headquartered in Phoenix, for the stores outside California. The Broadway ran into financial difficulties which resulted from poor management decisions and takeover attempts. In 1996, the chain was acquired by Federated Department Stores and the majority of locations were converted to Macy's. Several stores in affluent areas where Macy's already had locations, South Coast Plaza, Sherman Oaks Fashion Square, Century City Shopping Center, Beverly Center, and Fashion Island Newport Beach, were closed, refurbished and reopened as Bloomingdale's. Federated sold the remaining stores to Sears. The company can be traced back to Mott's, a store founded in 1874 by Jesse W. Mott, who sold boots and shoes at 714 Franklin Street. In 1876, Mott took on as business partner his store supervisor, Joseph Specht. The two added clothing to their wares, and presently moved the store to 703 to 705 Franklin, where it was listed in the city directory as Famous, Mott, and Specht. It was more popularly known as the Famous Clothing Company, famous reportedly coming from the public's referring to the store as the famous place for bargains. Retailer David May acquired the Famous Clothing Store in 1892. Sometime later, he acquired William Barr Dry Goods Company in 1911. He merged the two to create Famous-Barr. Famous-Barr was one of many St. Louis retail companies that owned a resort along the Merrimack River between the early 1900s to 1940s. In 1914, David May opened a new Famous-Barr department store in downtown St. Louis, the first air-conditioned department store in the country. On October 8, 1948, Famous-Barr opened its first branch store in Clayton, Missouri at the intersection of Forsyth and Jackson. In 1955, Famous-Barr opened another branch store, at the Northland Shopping Center in Jennings, a mall owned by Famous-Barr's corporate parent, the May Companies. The Northland store celebrated its 25th anniversary in 1980. In 1991, it took operational control of the LS Airs division in Indiana, and in 1998 took on the Jones store in Kansas City when May acquired that chain in the aftermath of the Dillard's acquisition of Mercantile Stores Company. Both chains retained their names, but shut down their headquarters. The Famous-Barr name was retired on September 9, 2006, when Federated converted most of Macy's regional department stores to the Macy's nameplate, with the exception of the Eastland Mall store in Evansville, Indiana. The Eastland Mall store closed and became Dillard's instead due to the existing Lazarus store, which already became Macy's in 2005. The downtown St. Louis store and headquarters were first shrunk and then closed in summer 2013. The remaining retail employees moved to other stores, while the headquarters staff moved to Earth City. Dayton's was an American department store chain founded in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in 1902 by George Draper Dayton. It operated several local high-end department stores throughout Minnesota and the upper Midwest for almost 100 years. Although it was regionally known as a high-quality shopping destination, Dayton's is best remembered for starting the discount shopping chain Target. The company was also instrumental in the history of shopping malls, opening the first indoor shopping mall in the United States, Southdale Center in Edina, Minnesota, in 1956. In 1969, Dayton's merged with Michigan department store chain Hudson's to form the Dayton-Hudson Corporation. The Target division of the company eventually grew so large that in 2000 the corporation was renamed the Target Corporation. Dayton-Hudson had acquired Chicago-based Marshall Field's in 1990 and Target rebranded Dayton stores as Marshall Field stores in 2001 in an effort to focus more on discount retailing. In 2004, Marshall Field's was purchased by May Department Stores, which subsequently merged in 2005 with Macy's, turning the remaining Marshall Field stores into Macy's department stores. For most of the company's history, the company was owned and operated by the Dayton family. Dayton's mark on Minnesota remains with three Twin Cities shopping malls started by Dayton's, Southdale, Rosedale, Ridgedale, and the original flagship location still standing. This company was founded in 1900 by brothers Pat and James Foley, in Houston, Texas, as Foley Brothers. It was originally acquired by Federated Department Stores Incorporated in 1945. In 1961, Foley's opened its first branch store at the Sharpstown Shopping Center and continued to add Houston branches over the next 5 decades. In the 1970s, Foley's opened stores in Austin and in the 1980s opened in San Antonio. By 1987, Foley's absorbed Federated's Dallas-based Sanger-Harris chain with stores in the Dallas/Fort Worth Metroplex, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tucson, Arizona, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 1988, Federated was purchased by real estate developer Compo Corporation, which immediately sold Foley's along with Filene's to May department stores to finance its deal. In 2 years, Federated filed for bankruptcy, disassociated itself from Compo, and merged with Campo's other retail holding company Allied Stores. After its acquisition by May Company, Foley's closed several stores in Dallas it considered underperforming in its Albuquerque, New Mexico, location, while also taking over 2 Lord & Taylor stores, one that was under construction in late 1988 at Penn Square Mall in Oklahoma City, part of the mall's 1986 to 1988 expansion, and the other at San Antonio's Shops at River Center. Over the next decade, May spent heavily to build new stores, replace outdated stores and refurbish existing stores. In 1993, May department stores consolidated May Daniels and Fisher into Foley's, which brought Foley's to the Denver Aurora, Colorado Springs, Boulder and Fort Collins Loveland markets and reintroduced Foley's to the Albuquerque market. On February 2, 1997, the 2 Arizona locations were transferred to May's Robinson's May division. In 2001, Foley's expanded into Louisiana after May Company acquired several Maison Blanche locations that had become Parisian stores from profits. Foley's was reacquired by Federated when it took over May department stores on August 30, 2005. In 2006, Federated started the conversion of Foley's into Macy's. Soon advertisements started to read Foley's, now part of the Macy's family. On September 9, 2006, the Foley stores were renamed Macy's as part of Federated's nationwide rebranding of all former May locations. In 2005, Federated announced that it would close Foley's 1,200-employee headquarters in downtown Houston. Frederick Nelson was the successor to a business founded by 2 partners, Donald E. Frederick and James Meekum, who had been mining colleagues in Colorado. They happened to connect shortly after Frederick arrived in Seattle on a steamer in 1890, and they pooled their resources to start a second-hand furniture business. After setting up shop in several locations, the business was named J.G. Meekum & Co. Sometime later, another mining colleague, Nels B. Nelson, arrived also from Colorado. He subsequently purchased a 1/3 interest in the business. Several months later, due to ill health, Meekum sold his interest to the 2 remaining partners and the name was changed to Frederick and Nelson. They vowed to create the largest and finest store west of the Mississippi and north of San Francisco. In 1891, the partners acquired the Queen City Furniture Company and began selling new furniture. Monroe was leery of rapid expansion, and he soon parted company with Frederick and Nelson. In 1907, the ailing Nels Nelson was returning from a trip to a medical spa in Bohemia and died at sea. Frederick was left to run the entire operation. In 1943, Frederick and Nelson opened a satellite store at Boeing Field at the Boeing Airplane Company's No. 2 plant. D.E. Frederick's dreams for expansion of the original store at Pine Street and Fifth Avenue finally were realized when the grand reopening was celebrated August 4, 1952. By 1980, Frederick and Nelson had become one of the fastest-growing stores in the nation. Ownership would change 3 more times in the next 9 years as business went on a downward spiral. Management changes occurred in 1982 when Battis Incorporated of Louisville, Kentucky, bought all of the outstanding stock of Marshall Field's. By the mid-1980s they were beginning to close the Oregon stores. Battis sold the money-losing Frederick and Nelson to local investors in September 1986. 2 stores were closed: Portland and Salem, Oregon. Poor management decisions led to an overabundance of lower-priced, out-of-season merchandise and investments in inventory at the wrong prices. Additionally, the inability to pay bills on time led to late deliveries of critical merchandise and empty stores. No longer known for fashionable, high-end clothing, Frederick and Nelson became unable to withstand pressures, particularly when the Seattle area entered a recession in the late 1980s. Fading rapidly, the chain filed for bankruptcy, and closed for the last time in May 1992. Goody's was founded in 1953 in Athens, Tennessee, by M.D. Goodfriend as an offshoot of a family retail business, the M. Goodfriend Store, that the founder's father, Mike Goodfriend, had started in Athens in 1913. The new store, Athens Outlet Store, focused on the sale of closeout, irregular, and previous year merchandise. The business grew, operating 20 stores by 1970. In 1978, the name was changed to Goody's. Goody was the college nickname of M.D. Goodfriend's son Bob, who had joined the family business in 1972. In 1979, Bob Goodfriend became president of the business and the company changed its merchandise focus from the outlet model to offering current, first-quality, brand-name merchandise. With this new strategic direction, the chain expanded rapidly. A private label clothing line was launched in 1993. By 1998, the chain recorded $1 billion in annual sales, and in 2000 it opened its 300th store. By 2004, there were more than 350 stores recording annual sales of $1.3 billion. In 2006, Goody's became a privately held company again when it was acquired by GMM Capital and Prentice Capital Management in January 2006. Sales in 2006 totaled $1.6 billion. In 2008, Goody's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and announced it was to close 69 stores. While Goody's successfully left Chapter 11 bankruptcy, it was announced 4 months later in early January 2009 that Goody's had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and planned to liquidate all of their stores. Following the liquidation of the stores, the Goody's trademark was acquired by Houston-based specialty retailers later renamed to Stage Stores in July 2009, with plans to reopen stores starting later that year. In September 2019 it was announced that Goody's, along with all other stores operated by Stage Stores Incorporated, would be converted to Gordman stores. On May 10, 2020, Stage announced it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and that it would liquidate all locations, Goody's and Gordman's included, all closed by the end of 2020. Abe and Isaac Maas started their retail career in Cochran, Georgia, working with their brothers, Jacob and Saul. By 1880, Abe was operating a store in Dublin, Georgia, and Isaac was operating a millinery store in Ocala by 1885. In 1886, Abe decided to move to a better location and chose Tampa, at the time a small village on Florida's west coast. Abe had been quoted as saying, "It's a waterfront town. Who knows? It may amount to something someday." Abe Maas opened the Dry Goods Palace on December 10, 1886. His brother, Isaac, formally joined his brother on September 15, 1887, and the store became Maas Brothers. After outgrowing its first 2 locations, Maas Brothers opened its third, and largest, store in 1921. This store was the second largest department store in Florida. By 1929, Maas Brothers dominated Florida's west coast. It was known as Greater Tampa's greatest store. In 1929, Abe and Isaac Maas sold Maas Brothers to Hahn department stores. Maas Brothers gained the buying power of the 28 department stores. In 1935, Hahn department stores changed its name to Allied Stores Corporation. Despite being owned by a national company, Maas Brothers was still operated by the Maas family. In 1935, Isaac Maas, who was serving as chairman of the board, died at the age of 71. Abe Maas, who was president, became chairman. Jerome A. Waterman, Abe and Isaac's nephew, became president. Jerome joined Maas Brothers in 1907. Abe Maas died in 1941 at the age of 86. In 1948, Maas Brothers opened its first full-line branch store in downtown St. Petersburg. Other branch stores opened in downtown Lakeland in 1954, downtown Sarasota in 1956 and downtown Clearwater in 1961. Maas Brothers opened its first mall store, in 1965, in the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. By 1981, Maas Brothers opened its 17th store in Gulfview Square Mall in Port Richey. This was the last Maas Brothers store built. In 1985, Maas Brothers absorbed the Savannah, Georgia-based stores of fellow Allied nameplate levies of Savannah. In 1986, Maas Brothers celebrated its 100th year. It was in the same year that Canadian real estate developer Robert Campeau completed his takeover of Allied stores. As part of liquidation and cost-cutting, Maas Brothers was consolidated with the weaker Jordan Marsh Florida franchise on Florida's East Coast in 1987. The plan was that the stronger Maas Brothers would help the weaker Jordan Marsh. This brought the number of stores to 39 throughout Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. In 1989 the name was changed to Maas Brothers / Jordan Marsh. In 1988, it launched a successful takeover battle with Macy's for Federated. Ironically, Federated would acquire Macy's in 1994. With the acquisition of Federated, Maas Brothers' former rival, Miami-based Barneys, became its sister store. As with the Allied acquisition, operations for Maas Brothers, Jordan Marsh, and Barneys were consolidated. By 1989, Federated and Allied were struggling to make its debt payments incurred from the takeovers. On January 16, 1990, Federated and Allied filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Several underperforming stores were closed, including the flagship downtown Tampa store in February 1991. As part of its plan of reorganization, the Florida operations would be consolidated and several stores would be closed. The Maas Brothers / Jordan Marsh headquarters was closed and consolidated with Barneys in July 1991. On October 20, 1991, the Maas Brothers stores officially became Barneys. The majority of the former Jordan Marsh stores were sold off since they competed directly with Barneys. Barneys, along with the other Federated divisions except Bloomingdale's, were converted to Macy's. Joseph Winchester Robinson was a merchant from Waltham, Massachusetts who moved to Rosemead, California in 1882 to develop orange groves. Robinson found the quality of goods and service from local merchants lacking, and re-entered the retail business, utilizing his contacts on the East Coast to deliver superior merchandise. Robinson opened a 1,440 square feet Boston dry goods store in 1883 at the Allen Block at the southwest corner of Spring and Temple Streets. In 1891, J. W. Robinson died at the age of 44 and his father, Henry Winchester Robinson, came from Boston to Los Angeles to take over the business, and the Boston dry goods store was renamed the J. W. Robinson Company. In 1887, J. W. Robinson Company's Boston dry goods store moved to a new store of around 3,000 square feet in the Jones Block at 171 to 173 Spring Street, considered an adventurous move because at that time, the location was far from the central business district of that period. When Robinsons moved again in 1895, Nathaniel Blackstone, brother-in-law of J. W. Robinson, moved into the vacated space and founded Blackstone's Dry Goods. From 1880 to 1890, the population of Los Angeles doubled from 50,395 to 102,479 people. In January 1895 the J. W. Robinson Company, which by that time advertised simply as the Boston Store, announced that after only 8 years, more spacious quarters were necessary, and that a new 4-story Boston dry goods store building was under construction at 239 South Broadway. Unlike competitors Bullock's, Desmond's, Imagnon and Silverwoods, in the 1930s and 1940s, Robinsons did not establish branches until in 1952 did it open its first of what would become about 30 branches. The second Robinson store was opened in Beverly Hills in 1952 on the corner of Wilshire Boulevard at Santa Monica Boulevard. Another store followed in Palm Springs. A store on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena followed. The store in Pasadena was the last freestanding store before the shopping malls took off. The first shopping mall store opened in Panorama City, Santa Barbara, and Glendale. By the time J. W. Robinsons was dissolved into Robinsons May, there were almost 30 stores in Southern California. A group of department store chains bought Robinsons in 1957. May department stores bought Associated Dry Goods and with it, Robinsons, in 1986. In 1989, May dissolved its Scottsdale, Arizona-based Goldwater's division, folding it into Robinsons. In 1992, May combined Robinsons and May Company California into a single brand, Robinsons May. Federated department stores, which had bought Macy's in 1994 and changed its name in 2007 to Macy's Incorporated, bought May department stores in 2005. Robinsons May was dissolved in 2006, and the former Robinsons stores were closed, sold, or turned into Macy's or Bloomingdale's branches. Barney Pressman initially opened a men's discount clothing store. His first store was in a 500 square foot space with 20 foot of frontage at 7th Avenue and West 17th Street in Manhattan in 1923. He raised the $500 to pay the lease by pawning his wife's engagement ring. Barney's clothes were stocked with 40 brand name suits and a big sign with a slogan, "No bunk, no junk, no imitations." Barneys sold clothing at discounted prices by purchasing showroom samples, retail overstocks, and manufacturers' closeouts at auctions and bankruptcy sales. He also offered free alterations and free parking. Women's clothing was introduced in 1976 on the third floor of the International House. In the following year, the women's store relocated to the penthouse, a new top-level enclosure. Barneys also added housewares, cosmetics, and gift departments to the store. Also in 1977, Barneys' in-store restaurant was renamed The Cafe. In 1989, the store formed a holding company with Japanese department store Isedan to operate stores in both countries. The first Tokyo store opened in November 1990. The agreement also called for the holding company to spend $250 million to open 30 smaller stores of approximately 6,500 square feet. The earliest of these smaller format stores opened in Costa Mesa, California in 1990. Barneys opened its first department store outside Manhattan in Chicago in 1993, followed by another large store in Beverly Hills, California, in 1994. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in early January 1996. During the bankruptcy, some stores shuttered, which included Cleveland, Ohio, Costa Mesa, California, Dallas and Houston, Texas, and Short Hills, New Jersey. In subsequent years, management would re-enter some of these markets with larger flagship stores. On December 20, 2004, the Pressman family sold its remaining ownership, less than 2%, to the Jones Apparel Group, which in turn sold the company in September 2007 to Dubai-based private equity firm Famous-Barr PJSC for $937.4 million. Included in Famous-Barr's purchase was an estimated $500 million in debt. The luxury market took a sharp turn for the worse after Famous-Barr's acquisition of Barneys. U.S. sales of high-end clothing, fragrances and accessories slipped 14% in 2009. Howard Sokol, Barneys' former CEO, resigned shortly after the change in ownership. The company failed to fill the position for over 2 years until it appointed Mark Lee to the post in September 2010. Lee is the former chief executive of Gucci Group and has consulted and sat on the board of many other fashion companies. After Lee's appointment, in May 2012, Perry Capital acquired a majority ownership of the company, which reduced its $590 million debt to $50 million. On August 6, 2019, Barneys New York filed for bankruptcy once more. On October 25, 2019, Authentic Brands Group announced it had bought the company for $271.4 million. Barneys' brick-and-mortar format was eliminated, with the future of the business to be announced. When ABG acquired Barneys, it confirmed that ABG's partnership with Seven & i Holdings in Japan would remain intact. On Friday, January 15, 2021, Saks Fifth Avenue unveiled a 54,000 square foot space on the fifth floor of its flagship in New York, titled Barneys at Saks. The partnership is aimed at continuing Barneys' New York tradition of unearthing and promoting emerging designers. On Monday, January 25, 2021, Saks Fifth Avenue unveiled the first standalone Barneys at Saks store at a 14,000 square foot location in Greenwich, Connecticut, and in April 2023, Seven & i Holdings sold their stake in Barneys New York and Japan to Laox Holdings. Laox has plans to improve Barneys Japan sales and expand the chain around Asia.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.